That's starting to become a huge problem because people can start to be afraid of many things. Because to be very honest, by definition, being brave means being have courage. And being afraid or fearful is quite simple. So it's also very simple to entice that in people. And people can start to become afraid, of course, of consequences of war. Such as in Georgia, there is this narrative of the West wanting to take Georgia into the war and to be part of it, which is ridiculous. But it's part of the narrative because it's easy then to bring up the fear. But it's also part of the so-called cultural wars that are actually brought to Europe by Russia, where they say, oh, you should be afraid of, for instance, the LGBT plus community because they will take away your rights or privileges or heterosexual family. I'm not sure what exactly. But again, it's just about the emotion of fear. And that's why I think the far right, the extremists, the populists in Europe got much stronger. And we will have to learn, and maybe we'll get to it by other speakers or in the rest of the panel, what to do about it. Because they are apparently winning. And I'm very afraid that Georgia will be facing that in October too.
Thank you. That's a great introduction for the panel. It's a classic populists playbook to play up fears, immigration swamping our societies, and then saying the situation demands a strong man. So, Knut, all eyes are on you here because one of the questions, I think, was, were the elections in the European Parliament a blip, a kind of anti-incumbency, people using their vote on elections they don't think are so important, but when it comes to their national elections, they'll revert to a more traditional parties. But now we've had these elections in Germany. So what do you think those portend? Where are we headed? Is this going to be replicated in the next round of German elections and national elections? Are we on this trajectory?
Well, I think yesterday night's results are not just another bad election. It is really a disaster. When you look at the two federal states in which the elections were taking place, Thuringia and Saxony, you see in the case of Thuringia that nationalist socialists and socialists nationalists could form a government. They have a majority if they would go together. And there is one misunderstanding I want to make very clear here. It is not a local election. Right. My country is the Federal Republic of Germany. Yes. We are based on federal states. Yeah. It's not on mayors, and I have high respect for mayors, but this is really putting our state in question, because these parties do not share the same view on which 75 years ago, by the way, our country was founded on Western values. They openly fight Western values. They are anti-EU and pro-Russian. So yesterday was a night of triumph for these guys in the Kremlin. Yeah, of course. And the main point, and let me just and stop then there, is we should really see that the elections we had and will have in the course of the year and next year will be used by Moscow to do one thing: weaken the EU. And the best way of weakening the EU is weaken the center of the EU. Yeah. And my country is placed in the center of Europe. And we're successfully able to manage it with France. But look where we are now. So it is not another bad election. It is really a disaster.
Thank you for being so clear about that. I just want to ask you a couple of follow-up questions. Why are they gaining so much traction? And I also was reading that, for example, the BWS, I can't pronounce the whole title of the party, but they are apparently saying that a condition for their participation in any coalition will be stopping aid to Ukraine.
Yes.
How potent is that? Can they have that influence? And why are they gaining so much traction? That's what we need to
First of all, from the technical point of view, last night, and that was one of the advantages of these late night, early morning flights, you can continue discussions for the whole night. I had a conversation, Emanuelis, with a friend from Poland. He was asking me, so these are regional elections, so why is this playing a role on the national level? Again, we are a federal republic, and they condition their readiness to join the regional governments by exactly stopping aid for Ukraine. And the problem is that we are not willing, and we cannot move 1 inch into that direction. But there is another, and I'll be very frank here, it has influence on us. When you compare the public statements of many of my colleagues today with the public statements of my colleagues half a year ago, you will see that this has become much quieter, much more quiet. And this is a very negative development. And that, just one sentence on this party, and please, dear colleagues, check it out. This is a one-person party. It is her will. Yeah. Her will. One politician, one person, Sarah Wagenknecht. Yeah. The program, the structure, the organization is one figure. You know what I want to say.
We have that experience in the UK. Nigel Farage ran a campaign for years to take the UK out of the EU, and I think he has, he succeeded, and it was this single-minded campaign and completely disingenuous rhetoric and false portrayal of the EU. So we have to be very careful of those determined individuals. I'm going to come to Ivanna in a minute because I want to sort of tease out a little bit more about what this means for Ukraine and how Ukraine is viewing this moment. But before I get there, one of the aspects that is so frightening about the rise of the AfD is this sort of explicit harking back to Germany's Nazi past. And Emanuelis, I want you to talk about how this looks, how you see the trends coming across in Europe and this rise in this kind of rhetoric from where you are.
I'm coming from Vilnius, actually being a boring proletariat member of parliamentary community last 30, no more like 30 years. 8 I'm elected. I'm sorry, it was supposed that I will speak tomorrow, but I should vote for Andrew Kubilius tomorrow in my parliament to make him commissioner. So I'm departing, and before that, it was the results you just mentioned by my friends, the results just published of former place named by all possible Potsdam agreements GDR, now is Saxony and Thuringen. Mm-hmm. So my mother was arrested by Gestapo, and she spent 4 years in Nazi camps. And for me, you know, I'm only one Jewish guy in my parliament for the last 3 decades. Always facing the consequences of the Holocaust and looking to the fact that Germany is, thank God, shifting your army groups to Lithuania, yes, to defend us against possible Russian invasion, and looking to the fact that you're supposed to morally lead European Union when our friends from the great island said goodbye to us, or let's say you just mentioned names of those enthusiastic destroyers of Europe in Great Britain. So from my point of view, it is a question how you will switch from your usual language in Bundespolitik to the going to fight against this phenomena when GDR was based on non-dialogue, communist dictatorship for 50 years, repressing the anti-Nazi dialogue who happens with Henrik Böll and other guys reconciliation in West side. So East Germany have no reconciliation with the past. It was simply pathetic communist regime, and now we have outcome of that, plus other issues, but outcome of their 50 years being in Soviet Union with their fake anti-Nazi, I'm sorry, I'm saying like a Jewish guy, fake anti-Nazi politics and fake, even today, telling from Moscow to Kiev that they are Nazis. And the Nazis are in Moscow. So in this case, their politics was to freeze the real authentic dialogue about Anne Frank, Hannah Arendt, about everything in East Germany. And now we have the result of that the dialogue was stopped in 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It was produced in Moscow, this frozen communist society, and now you have the echo after 34 years after Wendezeit, after unification of Germany. That's my comment. But from this point of view, you have other results related to Ukraine. Moscow, using those former subjugated people, just was statement by Moscow. We have newborn nation, means in East Germany. Again, not GDR, but newborn nation. Well, they like to split us in every possible way. So they're trying to split Germany. They're trying to influence the German opinion not to give anything, ammunition, to stop everything what's related to our liberation war in Ukraine. They're supporting so-called anti-Nazi narrative in opposite way. I sent official letter to Mr. Putin and from a Jewish community to stop this, like a Holocaust survival family, to stop this so-called anti-Nazi propaganda from Moscow. Well, that is a Nazi propaganda. We went officially sending letters. Don't speak in the name of Holocaust survivors from Moscow side. Stop that. This humiliation and mockery from Second World War. Then we are looking to the German side, that we will be capable to cope that in Bundestag and have effective measures to stop the spreading those pro-Moscow Nazi narratives in eastern part of Germany. Thank you.
Thank you. So that leads quite nicely to Ivanna. We have, now obviously we're worried about where these trends lead in terms of sustaining support for Ukraine, which other panels have suggested is still falling short of what we really need. We have elections coming up here in Georgia. We have elections coming up in Moldova later this year. To what extent do you see Russian meddling in all of this and the hand of Russia influencing the outcomes of these elections?
Well, I'm sure that Russia is not only interested in grasping the center of Europe, but I think that Russia is going to use any opportunity to increase the frictions that might happen in any of the Western societies. And definitely the electoral period is one of those when they might harvest more of their gains from what they've quote and unquote invested. But I wanted just to reflect a couple of things of how do we from Ukraine view what is happening with this radical right change in Europe, first and foremost, because we obviously were very worried when we were watching the European elections and everybody was to an extent exhaling that at least the numbers of those far-right parties were not overwhelming the centrist political parties in the European Parliament. But it seems that there are a couple of things that are leading to that situation. Partially, it's also probably something that is stemming from the historical cycles, because you would have had like leftist globalism for some time, and just naturally the conservative nationalism is kicking in. That's part of the thing. But then on the top of it, you have also the rebellion against the establishment that is not hearing the people to the extent that they would like to hear. And then you have someone, let's say Russian Federation, amplifying that dissatisfaction with the elites. And thirdly, I here agree with Markéta. This is definitely fear of losing prosperity and security, but not understanding that basically people are ready to give up on the democracy and freedoms, and they do not understand that once those are gone, that have been actually providing for security and prosperity, then the prosperity and security also will be gone. But I think that these processes are a bit different from what is happening in the central eastern part of Europe. And here I'd probably echo what Emanuelis was saying, because it's a bit different. Because you have Orban, you have Fico, you have Babiš, you have Kaczynski, you have all these different types of people that are suggesting their narratives to their nations, and it seems that they are falling, many of them are falling into autocracy and Russophilie. And I think something that is connecting them to Western European far rights is this amnesia. I think everybody has forgotten what was the threat of the Soviet Union and now read Russian Federation during the Cold War, and that is about Western Europe. But then everybody in the Central and Eastern Europe seems to be, or majority, okay, seem to be forgetting their Soviet slavery and what it meant for their people. And also the fear is also present on this territories. But again, people are not understanding that whatever Ukraine is standing up for right now, for the freedom, for the right to define our future, for the right to exist, and so on, if we will fail, that means this wave, this tsunami wave will go over to Europe and take it over, and then it will be about lives and freedoms and security and prosperity of every single European citizen. So obviously we are worried when we are seeing what's happening with this rise of populism, with this rise of the far-right movements, and do not see enough pushback on them. And we understand that that will have an impact on all the European policies. It will have the impact on the internal dispute and discussion how the EU will have to change. Because it is in the 2025 when you would have to address the issues that are pertinent to the European Union's future, irrespectively of whether the EU is or not going to be enlarged in the future. But that is also going to influence the whole discourse about this enlargement. It will influence the discourse about Green Deal, about migration, and definitely about military support to Ukraine under false pretexts. Calling for peaceful solutions with someone that can only understand the language of power and unity and strength.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to come back now to Markéta to pick up this issue of fear. I mean, a number of you have picked up on this idea that people are feeling fearful, they're worried about their security, they're worried about their economic situation. And so perhaps they're beginning to see Ukraine in terms of fear about what it means for them, and drawing the wrong conclusion that we need to sort of protect against getting drawn into it, rather than understanding if we don't win in Ukraine, our economic and our security situation is going to be even worse. They're not drawing the right connections. But it seems to me, certainly in the UK, a huge issue, a political challenge, is this issue of immigration. And Trump has been weaponizing that in the US, and that was being weaponized in the Brexit vote and continues to be weaponized in our political system. So even though the ramifications in Russia may be encouraging these narratives, it does seem to me this proximate issue of immigration is a really difficult issue, and all these populist parties from different angles are weaponizing that. Right. So the European Parliament, the European Union, the European Commission are trying to build up sort of burden-sharing schemes and solidarity on this. How is this issue going to be handled? How do we lance the toxic boil of this immigration issue so that it can't be weaponized? Easy question number two.
Absolutely. Well, I will divide the question into two parts. First, I will address the immigration per se, the topic of it, but then I will answer a little bit differently, because I think the solution lies in a broader picture. So the first part, the immigration part, the problem is, again, everybody is just talking and thinking with their emotions, and nobody is looking at the clear data. And yes, there is a huge part of fear-mongering regarding immigration, although in terms of the past 50 years and in terms of definitely the past 100 years, we are the least diverse cultures, we have the least immigration and also least refugee crisis, so to say. And of course, there are occasional spikes, especially when there is some conflict, such as was in 2022 with Ukraine. However, overall, people are moving less than they moved before. But nobody wants to hear that, because by feeling, by the titles in newspapers, it seems like there are these huge waves and there are these huge tragedies and everything. And then, of course, there are other things, such as immigration is not usually fleeing to another country to be a terrorist there. It's an offer from a working agency in the country of origin telling them, here you have a job, come work into this country. And usually the people say, okay, I will go to work in that country. So if somebody really wants to curb immigration, then don't, I don't know, allow working agencies to get migrants in the countries of origin. But of course, nobody will do that, because we actually need migrants for our economies. So that's the problem with this topic, that it's used just based on the fear, and nobody's using actual data. And sorry to be so passionate about it, but I just finished reading How Migration really works from Hein de Haas, so I recommend it. And the second part is, I think that we will resolve this by resolving our huge problem with politics and politicians in Europe currently. And this is sort of a hot take, so brought by a certain meme, but there is this sort of cycle in European politics currently where there is some huge leader, almost authoritarian or populistic, usually far right or right wing, and they are bringing down democracy. And an uninspiring centrist comes ahead and says, oh, I will save you, I will protect you. And yes, I'm looking sort of Emmanuel Macron and others, but I will not call out all of the uninspiring centrists in Europe right now, but there are plenty of them in my country too. And then, of course, people vote for them because they do not offend anyone. And then the uninspiring centrists do what? Nothing. They don't resolve any problems. And people are, again, like, of course, unsatisfied. And then the vicious cycle of extremists, populists promising everything come forward again. And I think this was a little bit now broken in, actually in UK, or even in France, technically. And me, as a huge supporter of Ukraine, I cannot stand behind Mélenchon. However, I do understand why French people finally broke the cycle and said, Macron, you are uninspiring centrist, we hate you, and we are voting for this left front against the far right. You know, and I am not a supporter of Mélenchon, but I do get it why. And I think this is something we'll see more and more, that these extreme polls will get in. But I think we sort of need to get rid of the uninspiring centrists and just put there normal quality politicians. Of course, that's difficult, but that would be my solution.
We need people like David Kramer to run for office in Europe, because he is very inspiring and very lively. There is this question about, why do the centrists end up being so boring and so safe and so cowardly? I mean, why do we allow the populists, the rabble-rousers like Nigel Farage or Boris Johnson, to occupy all the airspace? Why can't our political systems produce more inspiring leaders who are able to make the case? I mean, Knut, I was quite struck by something you said, which is, as a result of what's been happening in Germany over the last 6 years, you've seen politicians, instead of upping their rhetoric and making the case more effectively, they've been running scared.
Yes.
And it's like, why are they not fighting that fight?
Right.
So why are they running away? Why aren't they leaning in? I mean, so much is at stake. We all understand here what's at stake.
Well,
why are they chicken?
This is like in private life too. Any politician tends to look for the most convenient way to survive. And if the most convenient way to survive is to give in, people will give in.
John McCain never did that.
But you're right, and this is maybe an appeal to all of us, and we are here because we are combine, and we all share this view, we have to fight in our parties, in our nations, in Europe, for what we are standing for. And it is possible. I mean, I'm representing a constituency in eastern Germany, in the southern part of Brandenburg. Many journalists are writing lost case in support for Ukraine. No, you have simply to be loud. Yeah. There's always a guiding figure in these town hall meetings telling you, oh, we Germans have always been with the Russians, and when Russia and Germany get along well, it's good for Europe. And then you have to make a decision. Are you giving in, saying, oh, yes, you are partly right, and of course we have to discuss German-Russian relations, and so, or say no. And the interesting thing is when you say no, and elaborate, you get as much applause, minimum, as this leading voice of the nationalists. Yeah? But let me, and this is of course a week-long issue minimum, or years, on migration. I beg to differ a little bit. One signal from these elections and many previous elections is clear. The people are no longer, at least in my country, no longer accept what they consider an uncontrolled immigration. And as long as we have no answer to that, we will not break the success of the right-wing populists.
I have comment about that.
And Lukashenko and Putin have shown how effective the weapon of migration is, because it puts into question all the values we stand for. And it's destabilization, again, the European Union mainly. Because you look at what the German government did in the last days. We were much stricter on immigration to Germany and asking our neighboring countries. We only have neighboring countries. And now the new approach is send them back to Belgium, Luxembourg, Poland, and so on. And what is the consequence of that? Closed borders. And so guess who's winning? So very effective, and still we have not found the right answer. We will probably have to really go and reform the basic right of asylum.
Yeah. If there was an easy answer, we'd have done it by now. As someone who used to work very extensively on refugee policy, we always used to believe that we could never reopen the UN conventions because they would then just dismantle altogether, they would unravel altogether. But it's clearly rising up the political agenda, and it's unsustainable. I know you wanted to come in on this. I want to make sure we have time for questions, so I'm going to ask you briefly to come in on this.
Yeah, what?
And then Ivanna, any additional thoughts, and then we'll take some questions.
Continuing what just was said, can you imagine, friends, when Mr. Putin with Mr. Lukashenko, just footnote, bringing with the aeroplanes to the Nordic borders of Finland,
yeah,
Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Norway, tens of thousands, artificially, creating a problem like a hybrid war. What to do from humane point of view? What to do with all those pushback? Well, they instrumentalizing the hybrid war against us, bringing those poor human beings from Syria and Iraq, attracting them and then putting their army, these automatic guns, and the army groups, putting them to our borders. And our armies are looking to the Belarusian and Russian border army groups and trying not to let them go through. So you have just armies and border control confrontation against each other, reacting to the artificially. It's not, I'm sorry to say, it's not typical Mediterranean problem in our Nordic region. It's artificially created, instrumentalized immigration, and we should do I am from center-right party. We should react to that accordingly, and how we should open the borders and tell us how we should let them go to Germany. Well, if they're going through, they're kissing the Lithuanian earth and saying, thank God we are in Germany. And then when they see that they are not in Germany, they're running to German side. So what to do with that? Tell us, please. Well, it's additional from the catalog of Mr. Putin, Mr. Putin evils created artificially for our European rising problems.
Well, if we were in panel about immigration, I would like to talk about it, but I guess that would be too boring for you. Yes. But yes, there are answers, actually. And they are not closing borders.
Well, I think what's not in doubt is that the Russians are weaponizing immigration. It's another one of those fault lines along with all the other cultural ones, like on gender identity and sexual orientation. They find these splits and these controversial issues, and then they weaponize them. Ivanna, I'll give the last word to you on this opening round, and then we'll open it to questions.
I'm just thinking about this uninspiring centrists, and I would like to caution us not to look for entertainment in TikTok. It's not that we Ukrainians would be the ones that are immune to populism, to put it very mild. We're definitely not immune to that. But I think that this is something that is about both political elites and also the demand on behalf of the citizens. Because political elites, and that's something that gets us to what Stefan Meister was saying earlier, we are lacking the leadership. There is so much temptation to, just catch the wave and just surf on that wave, whatever the populist, the demand of the society is at this particular moment. But when you are seriously considering what you want to achieve, then it is about leadership. It is about taking difficult decisions and trying to explain them to people. Not an easy task, I understand. Much easier is to be maybe even inspiring and very entertaining. But that is not something that will get us through these challenges. And with regard to the people, it's also something that I believe it's important to nourish in the societies, that the demand has to be about responsibility. Because, inspiration and entertainment is good for a very brief period of time. Then comes the reality, and the reality is pretty harsh. In each nation, in each society, totally different issues and totally different problems, but at the same time, many of them are uniting us. And just very briefly on migration, back in 2015, was it? 2016, when there was this first wave of migration from Syria, somehow Europe did not want to admit that this was artificially made migration, also with the assistance of the Russian Federation. And then disregarding some of those influences, disregarding some of those mechanisms that Russians have used at that point, we have missed the point. And when we got to the situation when again they were weaponizing the migration from on the Polish border, Lithuanian border, Finnish border, with this with the help of Belarus and with the help of these poor people coming from the countries that are in need. And so therefore it's again about capability of doing the lessons learned work. We are not there yet. We are praising ourselves. We are trying to sit on the laurels how unified and we are, and how much we have achieved, and how incredible we've acted over this couple of years. We did not expect of ourselves, but at the same time, we should be much more critical to ourselves in order to get much further in whatever we've appreciated over the last decades.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say another disturbing trend, I think, is the amount of younger people who are disillusioned with the current politics on offer. And so it's people voting for the far right. It's not older people looking back to a mythical golden age. It's also younger people who are very disillusioned with what's on offer. But let me open it up to questions. I'm going to take 3 or 4 and give our panelists each a chance to comment on whichever one they want. Please make them questions, not statements and monologues. Thank you. So we'll go to the gentleman in front. My old friend from Washington, David from The Guardian.
I am David Smith of The Guardian. Just interested in your thoughts on Viktor Orban and Hungary in particular, and this model of seemingly more subtle, more insidious authoritarianism and his relationships with Donald Trump and the far right in America. Do you worry that kind of model might spread throughout Europe?
Great question. And actually, not all the far right representatives are the same, of course. There are different, but that was Orban. Okay, the gentleman with the yellow tie and blue shirt, going further back, about halfway down on the right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Actually, related to that question, almost on the other side of the spectrum, quite literally, you briefly mentioned Mélenchon and the far left. I wondered if the panel, do you feel there's an equal danger from the far left as there is from the far right? I heard recently that the far right's more dangerous, but the far left is more annoying, which might well be true. But I just wondered if you feel that there is any danger from there, or not. Your call.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have Orban, we have Mélenchon. I'm waiting for somebody to mention Maloney. Okay, so the gentleman right at the back with his hand up. Thank you.
I hope for Babiš.
Bobo Lowe, independent analyst. I wonder, picking up on Ivanna's point, that the problem isn't whether politicians are boring. The problem is whether politicians are effective and capable of delivering. So Scholz's problem in Germany is not that he's boring, it's that he's incompetent. And that, in fact, what we saw over COVID is that, for example, the British public quite likes a boring politician as opposed to an entertainer politician if they think the entertainer politician is dangerous and the boring politician might conceivably create a better result. I wonder what the panelists' thoughts are on this.
These are really great questions. Our politicians
Yes.
are getting a good tail lashing here. All right, I can take one more if anyone has one. Otherwise, take it away. Orban, Mélenchon, are the left boring and important, or boring and unimportant? What's the model for Orban and the connections with the US? Is it incompetence that is the problem? And does anyone want to have a shot at Maloney and what she's offering? Take it away. I'm going to go this way down.
All right.
Maybe I wasn't clear enough. Yes, I am not preaching for having an entertaining politicians. I am absolutely for their effectiveness and their readiness to deliver, because it really takes seriousness, professionalism, readiness to engage with different stakeholders in order to get the solution that might be not very appealing in the first, in the first phase, but will get you through with through the challenges to something that is more important for all the citizens. So totally agree here. I'll probably passed on the danger of the far left, but with regard to Orban, I really think that it has been a long time that the European Union would have had to act much more seriously internally with regard to opportunism that is so far being allowed to Hungary under Hungarian Prime Minister, because this is about this all the time lowering common denominator for action. That is exactly what Orban is doing on different occasions. Well, certainly with regard to Ukraine, we've been seeing quite a lot of this limitations to usage of the military support towards Ukraine, or we've been kept hostage to our even NATO-Ukraine dialogue back in 2017, 2018, 19. So it didn't appear now, it's not something new. But now I think that also there should have been a much stronger reaction from the European Union when Hungary has started its presidency in the EU to do all this round without any mandate round of so-called peace talks going to Moscow and going to China and presenting this as if this is going to reach something. I think it's a Trojan horse right now inside the EU, and if the EU is not ready to enact its 7th article of the European foundation law, I think we will see many more other attempts to blow the European unity on different occasions from within. Others will follow the path that Orban is suggesting as his behavior.
Knut.
Let me try to start with Orban and Meloni, because there's one combining thing, and this is the EU. Orban is nothing without the opportunities he enjoys from the European Union. And so the answer is very clear. We have to be very strict in confronting Orban with the no-goes, because he will not, in the end, not endanger Hungary's position inside the European Union, because this is all Hungary has, and we should play that card much stronger. And the same applies to Giorgia Meloni, but she publicly accepted the dominant role of the European Union and adopted her positions to this fact. And so that would be on Orban and Meloni. On the far left and far right, that's, again, from the German point of view, from a German perspective, quite interesting, because we no longer see what is far left. There is an established far left party called Die Linke. They are the inheritance of the former communists. We have known them for minimum 30 years. They have proven to be quite reliable. But we, Christian Democrats, have built a firewall to this party with which we could somehow live.
Yes.
But what we are doing now is trying to seek a coalition or something with a party which I would not put under the flagging far left. What this Sarah Wagenknecht group is a group, a one-person dominated movement, and I call them, as you might remember, nationalist socialists, not Nazis. But the ideological background of Sarah Wagenknecht is much more complicated than just to put her under a far left label. And secondly, it's always difficult abroad but in the case of the outgoing chancellor, I will be quite frank, the problem with our current chancellor is not that he is uninspiring. The problem is that it's not the uninspiring ideas he has. The problem is that it's difficult to detect the ideas.
That's the problem.
I'm quoting The Economist. I'm quoting The Economist. The Economist was having a headline on my country, and this is hurting me. The hole at the heart of Europe. That's terrible.
Spoken like a true ex-diplomat there, Knut.
I can't be fired.
Emanuelis.
Yes, I will be concentrating, not looking of your last remark, that we cannot find any ideas. Okay, it's about one party in former East Germany. You just mentioned, led by this lady. But in general, you should go deeper. What they're doing before election, which type of ideas Mr. Orban is promoting. So his headlines. Okay, before his headlines was to fight George Soros. Now, and the general, how to say, imperial Jewish conspiracy that was 10 years ago. Now his headline is to make peace. Which peace? It's a network created by combined Kremlin forces created a stereotype slogan in Lithuania, in Hungary, in all possible European countries to make peace. And to make peace means to surrender.
Yeah,
This means go to their slogan of alternative for Germany. This actually, in my case, it's, I look to them not only like pro-neo-Nazi party, but what they're talking about Ukraine, to make peace. Which type of peace Mr. Orban is promoting, sitting in Kremlin, and when Mr. Putin is saying about his vision how to recreate former Soviet Union space, what he's repeating on every occasion after Munich conference and before that. So it's repeated in every country. So we are talking about radical forces who based on one package of ideas useful for Kremlin. I'm trying not to be a Baltic anti-Kremlin paranoid guy. I'm trying to say that the narratives in all those parties are extremely the same. Extremely the same, duplicated. From my point of view, in my country, in 2 months, just during Russia, in 3 months, we have new party based on anti-Semitic idea and on populist. In 3 months, raised one of the most popular party in extremely stable Nordic Lithuania, and on the same ideas to make peace with Moscow, and so to conflict. We don't need United States. United States influence is too big against United States military involvement in Europe, and so. Everything what was repeated by FSB and before KGB, when we have Federal Republic of Germany, GDR, all this slogan now is working in those radical party lines. And then is the question about Germany. Just repeating, after yesterday election results, you should be more outspoken. The classical parties should have new, if possible, you should consider to have new tunes, new voice, and fight them on everyday basis.
So the very last word between us and the bar goes to you, Markéta, to close today. Thank you.
Now I'm afraid everybody will directly leave to the bar. But I have two comments on the far right, far left, and on the uninspiring politicians, because I sort of started it. I think first I want to mention that I don't think that uninspiring and entertaining are the antonyms that we were looking for.
Yeah.
You actually made a very good point. What I meant by uninspiring is having no ideas, no ideology, and also lacking the courage to stand behind them if you by any chance have them. Because sometimes a lot of politicians go into politics and then they see the polls and the polls say, oh, this is a controversial topic, and they suddenly step away from it and lose it. And I think that more politicians should be trying to be rewarded by history, not by immediate political results. And just quickly for the far right, far left discussion, I was thinking about it, and I think that the distinction is in what these extreme poles are actually threatening. And currently, most far-right parties in Europe and in the world are threatening democratic institutions, the state, our democracies. And what far left is theoretically threatening are companies, oligopolies, deprivatization, going towards more centralization and owning of the state again. Absolutely. And if you ask me what is more fragile, whether our democracies or our oligopolies and companies, I have the answer. So I think far right is far more dangerous because of what it threatens and how strong that is.
Well, I found that inspiring. Can everybody please give our panel a great round of applause? Thank you so much for sticking through to the end.